Hi guys, Justin here again. I wanted to do another video where we're going to take some photos from a photographer in the group and do some edits to them. It's a continuation of the TAPP takes series that I'm starting up, where I'd like to work with people's photos from our group and try to do some corrective things in Lightroom as well as some stylistic things. And this is all up for debate. None of this is written in stone. It's not rules. When I talk correctively about the edits, when I'm talking about corrective edits, I want to make it clear that I'm looking for fundamental things that I'm trying to correct for. I'm trying to make sure we correct exposure, retain some values in clipped highlights and clipped shadow detail. I don't want to make things too noisy or too overexposed or underexposed. I'm looking at things in a corrective way. That stuff I think is pretty universal when it comes to our fundamentals when we talk about editing our images. The other side of things that I want to delve into some more is stylistic edits, and this is the stuff that we can all argue about and say, well, I prefer this way and I prefer it that way. So when I do these edits stylistically, I'm coming from my point of view and how I like to see things now. Full disclosure, I really like to crush my tone curve at the black and white clipping points. It makes for a neat look. That's I don't want to say it's trending right now, but it's what I do in my photos, and I have people tell me that they notice a particular style from my images simply on that tone curve a lot. It does a lot of heavy lifting in my editing. So when I show you that tone curve in these edits, I don't mean to say that's how you should edit your images too, but because I apply that tone curve, it does change how I do some of my corrective edits. So this is all a very organic and ever-changing process. A year from now, I'm probably going to have a completely different take on how I edit my images, and this could all change. So what I hope that you can get from it is that when you see what I'm doing stylistically, that you might be able to apply it to your own vision for your images, and maybe that you can find ways to grow your own style. So I'm going to be editing Lori's photos from our group, Lori Grace Bailey, and I'm going to be applying a preset that we built in the last video. So I will be linking back to the video before this when we were editing Mina's photos. So I have a preset that I created for her, and none of these photos right now have anything done to them. They're all standard, straight out of camera. Some images here, and Lori has some very nice images. So I've got some really nice things to work with here. Some solid baseline straight out of camera images that give me a lot of angles to take on the editing. So I don't really feel like I'm doing much corrective editing here with these images. I'm really just augmenting what I like about them and see if I can take it in a different direction and give them a look and maybe a style that that is consistent image to image throughout this whole set. So that's one thing I'm looking for, is consistency. Hundreds of photo shoots in the last couple years, and I can definitely say I have a consistent look with my images that is recognizable, and so this could help you build your own look that will start to show itself throughout all the images you're editing for even a whole year. So I'm going to work with this first image, and this was the first photo I see here. I'm going to go ahead and immediately apply the preset that we created in the last video. It's called Mina Edit. And right off the bat, it does a highlight, pullback, and a shadow push. It adds a little bit of contrast. And you can see in our tone curve here, the RGB tone curve, it has crushed the black values and crushed the white clipping points, the black clipping point and the white clipping point. And that's a custom tone curve we created. You can go back to the last video and see how we created that. And it adds its own look very, very quickly. Like when I hit that preset, you see what it does. So before, after. And the thing about doing this tone curve adjustment is we will muddle dark dark values and black. So our darkest shadows will start to muddle with the black clipping point. So you'll lose detail in the shadows. So that's not a great thing to be doing if you're submitting images to competition. They will dock you for losing values in the black clipping point. They want to see discernible detail throughout the shadow range. So my style wouldn't grade very well in competition for image competition. So it gets a lot of fanfare from other photographers and from brides and grooms, but I wouldn't submit an image. I have a black and white image that I recently edited for competition, and I won't be submitting it with this preset applied because it loses too much value in the shadows. So I also have this Mina edit preset also has a push on the hue slider here for yellow and green. And what this does is if you look before and after, pay attention to the green plants in the background. If I push it forward, you can change the color of the foliage. It looks good on outdoor grassy photos or desert images, but it's a slight effect here. But on a grassier photo or greener photo, you would notice it more. There's a baseline sharpening applied and noise reduction, and a slight post-crop vignette added. And that's stylistic, like you don't have to do that to your images. I like to do it a little bit because it can kind of draw a little focus inward to your subject. But I don't get too crazy with it. If I'm doing it in a preset, I will pull back on it just a little bit, like between 10 and 20. This preset also has the saturation for blue primary pushed up a little, and that can add a little bit of saturation and vibrance to your image without oversaturating. So it's a neat slider to play with. Sometimes I notice it pushes shadows up a little bit too. So that's our Mina preset. And I'm going to apply it to all the images right now, right off the bat. I'm going to Control A, select all the images. I'm going to sync them. And normally let's say I had done edits to the other images where we did spot removal, cropping, lens adjustments, or local adjustments. If I were to apply this synchronized setting to everything, it would override those local adjustments I make. So you wouldn't want to do this to all the images if you had already done local adjustments to other images. You'd want to uncheck the local adjustments, spot removal, crop, lens corrections. Typically you'd want to uncheck those, and you'd want to uncheck that's fine. And if you'd done anything to this exposure wise, if I'd bumped the exposure on this image and I didn't want if I'd done too much to the highlights and shadows and I didn't want to apply that to all the other images, I would uncheck those as well. But right now, like, this would be a safe synchronization to do to all the images and to apply the same effects of that preset to all the photos right off the bat. So that would be my first move when I start editing a set of images. And so we'll start with this first image. First thing I would do is cut white balance color picker, and I'm looking for a neutral gray. Where the primary light source is hitting, and so his suit is a good first start. Right there. It's a little on the green side. I'm going to push the tint up to balance out some of that green. So you can see the tint was really green, and now we balanced it to make it a little more neutral. I might cool this down a little bit. And then the thing here is we have mixed lighting. I can tell Lori shot with an on-camera flash that was ungelled. It was a bare flash. That color temperature reading off that flash is a little more cooler than its surroundings. These bulb fixtures up here are closer to an incandescent bulb fixture. So if I corrected white balance for the ambient light right now, it'd be down around like 3600, and that's a white balance correction for the ambient light. But you see our main light on our subjects here is ungelled bare flash, which registers much cooler. It pushes, when we push our white balance down to correct for ambient, it's pushing our main light flash down into a bluer range. And we've got a couple corrections for this. One right off the bat is I could go here and do the local adjustment tool, the brush tool right here, the adjustment brush, and I could go do a temperature adjustment, and I could push the value up warmer and then zoom in, and I could paint them in warmer. and you could do that, with some certain degree of precision here. I'm just hoping not to spill that brush onto the surrounding floor, because if I did, I'll do it right now, it's going to warm it up considerably. See what it's doing there? So I'll undo that. I want to keep that correction. I think most of that correction can be up here. I can kind of forgive it here down on the floor because the main flash isn't hitting the bottom part of her dress as much. So I could have kind of feathered it in and blended it and not really gone all the way down to the bottom here to fill in, but I'll just do it for example's sake here. So I've painted them in with the local adjustment and warmed them up. So now I would say I'm going to undo it. See now we see where they were at before I did the local adjustment, and now I'm going to go all the way to where we're at now. So I warmed them up. Now they match the color temperature of the ambient light because I painted them in that way. So if I warmed up the entire scene, it would do it in unison with the ambient light. So now we look like we have a much more consistent white balance here between our subjects and our ambient light. So that's what we can do when we have mixed lighting situations and we're main lighting on a bare flash. What I would have done on the day of the shoot is I would have put a corrective gel filter, a CTO, color temperature orange gel, probably a full CTO gel, over the flash in this situation, and we could have matched the temperature of the light from the flash with the color temperature of the ambient light. So that's about all I would do here. Maybe pull back on the highlights a little bit because we have some blown exposure in her dress. And that's all there really is to it. I mean, I guess I could crop in a little bit, but now we kind of throw them into a different area. Maybe it's a little more intimate there. It's a lot of floor showing. I would have maybe dropped down to a knee and tried to shoot upward a little bit, but for what it is, we've corrected it a little bit better. And I want to zoom in and look at the noise in this image because I do see it's shot at ISO 6400. I would probably not sharpen so much and push our noise reduction up a little bit. That's pretty good perceivable noise in this image for being shot at 6400, and the reason why we're getting away with that high of an ISO is she lit it well and she used the flash, and if we light things well at high ISO, it's not as discernible the noise, and that's a printable image probably up to like 11 by 14. You could get away with that perceivable noise in the photo. So that's what I would do with that photo, and these are gonna be pretty quick from here on out, as quickly as I can do it, because I already have that Mina preset applied. So moving forward, here is a backlit image where I can see the rim light from the flash is hitting him in the face and bouncing onto her face and giving a little fill to her. This is one where I'd probably want to play with the dehaze slider, so I'm going to move that over to the right a little bit. And you can see, like, I don't have a pure black here because of what I've done to the tone curve. I'm going to show you just so you can see it. If I went to a linear tone curve, like this is what our normally our tone curve is set to, that's what it looks like when we have an actual black point in the image. So now there's more contrast. So I'm going to undo that. This is our tone curve. I might bring back some black clipping point in it just a little bit to add that contrast that I'm trying to do with the dehaze slider. And just to explain that tone curve a little further, what I've done is I've now made in the image the blackest point. There is no true black. We've turned a shade less than black into the darkest point of the image, and that's what's happening every time. If I bring this all the way back down, we now have a true black in the image. Oh, sorry, it's getting wonky here. See, as I bring it down, we're returning a true black value into the image. So right now, our darkest point is a almost black, and I like it. I think it's a cool look. It's a matte look. I could add more contrast here. I could try and recover a little bit of highlight detail. And you see, if you try to recover highlights that are clipped where there is no value there, it looks kind of like muddled here. I don't think it's a good look. It looked better probably like right here. Now we start to have a little bit of gradation in that starburst there. I might even raise the exposure a little bit and add more contrast. And sometimes it's okay to go really high contrast if you have a very flat, washed out image in terms of there's a backlight going on and it adds a haze. So if I pumped it up to 100, I don't think that's too bad looking. You may not like that, but I don't think it's bad. And I could add a little green in here. I see it's a little magenta. So slightly, maybe I'd warm it up a little bit more. Another thing I might do this image is this is a great candidate for a black and white. So I just go to the black and white, and because I already have a tone curve here from our preset, it has a neat look to it already. And so undo, redo. Yeah, I think I would leave this one black and white just because I like the values in it. When we do this rimlet kind of image, they make for nice black and white photos. So I'm gonna leave it there. All right, next photo. Oh, there we go, cute girl. Our preset's already applied. The tones look pretty good in this. I want to bring more focus to her face in the mirror, so I might raise the exposure a little bit to kind of correct for her skin tone. And I would do a radial adjustment here. And I would do it for exposure. And I would bring the exposure down a little bit and kind of leave the emphasis on her. And because it's indoors and it's lit this way, it's purposely lit with flash. Who's to say that the lighting condition isn't believable that we primarily lit her face, the baby's face, versus the surroundings? So I feel like what we need to remember when we edit is that we are in control of the lighting situation from inception to editing. So when you take a picture, you have an intent of how you want the image to look, and I also feel like the editing process plays into that. So no one is going to look at this photo and say, well, that's not possible. You only have light on her face and the ambient, the area around her is darker. You know, how did you do that? No one would question your lighting circumstances. So why not, you know, take some creative liberty with how we edit? So, you know, I'm going to remove this. You can see what it looks like. So all I did was bump the exposure to correct for her face, and I added a little, I added a radial filter here to bring down the ambient around her, and I think we have a better image just off of that alone. I might, and I'm not a big fan of cropping. I feel like when I shoot, I'm shooting with the intent of delivering an image as I shot it. I'm cropping, you know, visually in camera. But this one might be a photo where we benefit from a crop. I don't know if we need to see the entire dress of the baby. We could probably just come right here, like right there. Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of the center framing now that I've cropped it, but it's a different image. The crop could be something you can play with. Maybe crop out that floor at the floor and just leave the rug here in the image. Okay, I can zoom up, move up a little bit, like right there. I kind of like that. I think that's a better image than what we started with. And I can zoom in a little bit, check our noise. She was shooting at ISO 800. I could probably push the noise reduction a little bit, but we're splitting hairs at this point. It's a pretty clean image, and it's not meant to be printed at 100% when we're viewing the baby's face like this. Or maybe it is, but it's still passable. So white balance, I like the white balance. It's warm enough. Yeah, not much more I would do to this image. So next photo. Great photo. Our preset did all the heavy lifting, I think, and I'm going to pull back on the highlights a little bit to kind of bring back some of the values in that blown out flower. I'm going to do a local adjustment right here. Bring down the flower a little bit more. It's a little hot, and I think it's taking away from her eyes. Let's highlights down a little bit. All right, now I want to go in and give her a little bit. There's a local adjustment for iris enhance that's already built into Lightroom, so you can kind of come in here, play with her eyes a little bit. It adds a little saturation and brightness to her eyes, so undoing it, redoing it. And it's not doing too much here because there's already big catch lights in the eyes that are kind of dominating the iris and pupil here. So yeah, the main focus is really that eye there. Color is good. I don't even think you need to warm it up too much. And we're at ISO 400. There shouldn't be any noise, so my baseline sharpening and noise reduction is fine. I'm good with that image. It's already cropped with intention in camera. I don't need to crop it anymore to improve it. It's hard. I can tell. Yeah, I can tell they're shooting at 1.4 wide open. It's really hard to get eyes in focus when you're this close at 50 millimeter or 85 millimeter to get them both in focus if they're not on the same focal plane. So that's something we got to look out for when we're shooting. When we're aiming for the eye, we can either stop down a little bit, but there's a look going on here, and I think there's a focal point, and it's that eye right there. The other one's not as important, so long as you have one drawing you into it. So I could accept that for this image. All right, so that's pretty good. Next one, the preset's doing most of the heavy lifting here already. Before, after, we already got a little fill on the shadow side of the bird here. I might push it a little bit more, maybe raise the exposure a little bit more, and bring the highlights down a little bit more. And I might add a little more contrast here to make it look more menacing. Maybe I might even do a little iris enhance to the eye of the falcon here, or the hawk. I think this is a red-tailed hawk. Or no, it's not. Harris hawk? I don't know. Let's see. Pretty cool image. I might crop a little bit. No, maybe not. Yeah, I like it. Sometimes I like to play with the clarity slider up on an image like this, so this might bring more focus to it. Kind of gives it a cool, edgy look. I mean, this photo is pretty good, straight out of camera, given the lighting conditions. The sun being up top, high in the sky, I can tell. Maybe I could come in here, do a radial adjustment, right here, the radial adjustment, and see if I can pass off a little more emphasis on the subject and bring down the environment a little bit. Normally, and also you can go in here and go to brush and go to erase and erase away where that radial filter is hitting. But I feel like the radial filter was so subtle that I didn't even have to do that. See a little bit of an effect of it. Yeah, so I like that. I would just leave it right there. It's sharp enough already. ISO 200, 1,000th of a second. It's sharpened a little bit more. Yeah, pretty cool. Okay, next photo. Move a little faster here. I really like this photo. Let's see. I would go. You know, I shoot with Nikon now, and I notice I tend to stay on the -10 area of tint on my natural light photos. On the Canon, I'm kind of okay with it right at the middle at 0. I don't like my photos to be too green or too magenta. I might warm this one up a little bit, give it it's kind of a golden hour look here, and I'll pull back on the highlights a little bit and push. I don't know, this one's pretty good straight out of camera. Yeah, we had a great photo to work with here. I might work on the cropping a little bit. So a little more center frame. Zoom in, take a closer look at them. Pretty clean. I think the preset did most of the work here. It's got a good look. Yeah, that's probably one of the strongest images in this group, so it didn't need a whole lot of work. If I were editing a whole bunch of these images, my work would be done pretty quickly because the preset does hit most of the look without having to do too much. So next photo, and just for the heck of it, I'm going to copy and paste the settings from the previous photo to this photo by hitting the previous button just to see. Oh, and remove that crop, of course. I will reset the crop. I like it a little warmer. Maybe I'll raise this up. This one's got a haze to it. It's very beautifully lit. There is rim light coming from the background, from the sun, kind of giving us this wash here, this washed out tones, and then there is a front light to the right. There's a light source to the right, like a strobe or something, or a speed light, giving a nice short lit portrait here with the shadows falling off on the broad side of the face. I really like the lighting on this one. I want to go to the dehaze. I will push that a little bit to bring back some contrast and darker values in the shadow of the face. I want to add more contrast here. And I think I want to play with that clarity slider a little bit and push a little more clarity. Bring back some more detail in here. And I'll be damned, that's a pretty cool looking portrait. Might cool it off just a little bit. 55, we were at 6,056.92. Okay, undo, redo. That's pretty good. One thing I might do is I'll go in close, and this is me being really nitpicky. I might clean up her face, although I don't think that's really a big deal. Right now I might clean up some of this hair. And you can draw with your clone tool if you don't know that. You can click and drag and draw with it and clone out things, heal things along a drawn path. So you can correct a lot better than you used to when it was Lightroom 4. Getting crazy here. Click on that. Move this over. Trying to source clean skin to fix these areas. I'm drawing still, cleaning up the skin some more. We're getting pretty good. And like I said, I'm being nitpicky, but I probably would be cleaning this up on a portrait like this. If it had been an environmental portrait and we were pulled back and not looking so closely at her face, I probably wouldn't have. I definitely wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have cleaned those stray hairs up, and I wouldn't have blemish removed. So if we're looking at a full body portrait with stuff in the environment around the image, I would not be doing any touch up like this. But because it's a mostly torso up portrait, I'm coming in here to do a little bit of cleanup. Remember, you can click, drag, and draw where you want to clean up the skin. I'm going to do a before and after so you can see what the skin was. You see how we didn't have a lot of detail in this part of her face before straight out of camera, and now with a little bit of editing we brought more detail in and cleaned up some blemishes. I would probably even go in here, clean up the hair here. I'm drawing very tiny increments. And this might be an image, if you feel more comfortable, you could take the photo into Photoshop and do your cloning and healing in there. But I've gotten pretty good with the healing brush in Lightroom, and the more I can stay out of Lightroom or stay out of Photoshop, the better I'm doing my job, because I really feel that I'm faster doing this stuff in Lightroom. Cool. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could get into all this stuff up here, but I'm going to move along. I might do a quick iris enhance. I'd like to add a little contrast to that. I don't know if I'm doing anything. And I might try to whiten. I mean, I use the teeth whitening, but I pull back on the brightness and the saturation, desaturation. And I want to see if I can whiten up her eyes a little bit, so just a little bit. And I'd like to try one more local adjustment for clarity. And I'm painting in with the local adjustment brush a little more clarity. I just want to discern a little more detail in her face. I think that looks pretty good. Before, after, before, after. I like it. That's not a bad look. Might not be your style, might be too contrasty, might be too warm, but that's why we can have this discussion right now, is that you can look at this and see what you do or don't like about it. And so, yeah, next photo, I'm going to warm this one up, I'm going to bring some highlights back in her face a little bit and lower the exposure. I want to push the shadows a little more to kind of discern some detail in these darker muddled areas behind her from the dark tree and her dark hair. We don't want dark hair to blend into dark surroundings. That's why sometimes we rim light things with an extra flash, or we try to keep, like maybe I would have moved her to this highly lit area of the background. I would have changed the vantage point so she would have contrasted it over this white area, because now we have this big white area detracting from our subject. Just something to think about when we're taking these pictures. I like to try and keep my subjects in front of lighter backdrops if possible. I'm going to bring down the white point a little bit. I normally don't, but she's still pretty white. I might cool her down a touch. And I'm just kind of touch and go here, seeing what I do and don't like. Maybe I'll add a little more contrast. Let's go before and after. I'm not going to do any blemish removal on her today. And I think a lot of the look here is that tone curve, bringing down the blown highlights in her cheeks. The brighter highlights in her cheeks are kind of have that tone curve applied. Let's see. Beautiful image though. Yeah, most of that look is the tone curve. So you may not like that tone curve. I can go back in here and go to linear. You can see it more naturally. You might see it. You might like it like this. I think it's a strong image either way. My tone curve, no tone curve. Maybe I'll leave it like that. I think it's a stronger image without the tone curve applied. That's so subjective. I like it, but it's nice like this too with an actual black clipping point. All right, this photo. Bring the exposure down a little bit, add a little more contrast, bring back the highlights a little bit, push my shadows a little bit more. It's pretty close right there. I might just push the temperature a little warmer. And now I'm going to do some stuff with the lens correction. So always when you play with the lens correction, start with constrained crop. So that way, when I make an adjustment, it crops it automatically. Otherwise, if you don't, you will just see this white space and it kind of throws you off. So I will do the constrained crop. Right away, I want to rotate the horizon line. And now I want to play with the vertical adjustment. This is called keystoning, where you're bringing the top of the image closer to you. And I would add a little bit of the aspect slider, push it up a little bit to lengthen them a little bit, because I did bring the top of the image closer to the photo. It can kind of compress your subjects. And I would leave it like that. Before, after, before, after. Not bad. Okay. So that's it. These come in really handy when you're working with real estate. So if you're ever working in real estate or with commercial or architectural buildings, you can use these to correct perspective. All right. Let's see here. I would warm this photo up a touch and push a little exposure, bring a little bit back on the highlights. It's pretty good to go right off the bat. I do remember this photo. She has lipstick on her teeth. So I'm going to zoom in on her teeth. And I'm going to clone tool. I clicked on the clone tool right here. And I'm going to click and paint around here and see if we can sample the tooth next to it and clean up the lipstick. Right there. All right, that works. And clean up some blemishes. I'm not going to blemish remove right now, but I already kind of gave you guys a demo on the couple photos ago. But yeah, I definitely would clean up around here, because when I zoom out, I still see it. But yeah, teenagers love it when you clean up their pimples. And I like to tell people who aren't nice to me that I will add pimples in post if they aren't nice to me. So watch. Let's see. I'll show you how I can add it. See how we got a pimple here? I could draw right here and then sample the pimple skin. See, if you're not nice to me, I will give you worse skin. Look at that. 2 pimples she didn't have right there. That'd be a really mean thing to do. She seems like a nice girl. Do these removals. Move along. Oh, this one would be a good candidate for iris enhance. So I'm going to go in here, paint in her iris a little bit more, and I think I'd like to do a teeth whitening down here. See if I can whiten her teeth a little bit more. Since she has that lipstick on it. Kind of see a little pink tone in it. And the default teeth whitening setting on the local adjustment, it's set up a little too bright and a little too desaturated. I like to scale it back a little bit. Otherwise, it looks like they have really bright white teeth, which is wrong. So undo, redo, before and after. I like it. Yep. All right, next photo. Most of the work's done in the preset. I'll warm it up a little bit. I will pull back the highlights a little bit because she's got some highlights in her arm that could be recovered that aren't too blown. Canon RAW files tend to recover highlights very nicely compared to Nikon RAW files, but Nikon RAW files recover shadows amazingly. I'm getting a phone call. Take that a little bit. All right, now with teeth whiten real quick. The local adjustment tool, and I'm using a gaming mouse that has all these buttons pre-programmed for me, so I can just switch tools by pressing buttons on the mouse. But ideally, normally I would be going up here to the tool kit and picking the actual item I'm using. That was a local adjustment tool that I was just doing, the local adjustment brush. And I might do her iris enhance again. It. And I wouldn't do any blemish removal on this photo because it is a environmental portrait. You can see her surroundings, and her face is such a small part of the image, you can't really discern the details in her complexion. So even at this viewing distance, you can't see it. So yeah, that's one I wouldn't play with too much for blemish removal. Don't kill yourself on blemish removal on a full body portrait. There's just no reason to do it. They'll never see it unless it's like very bright red. Then like hook them up, do a little favor there. I might do a radial. Gosh, notifications here. I might do a radial exposure adjustment and draw a little more focus on her. So I will bring down the backdrop a little bit. Reset, redo. I might push my exposure up a little bit more now that I did that. So before, after. And you can kind of see when I do the before and after, you can see how I corrected for her values. Her face is in the shadow, and that highlight is coming from the sun off to the left of the photo. So I'm correcting for her skin, trying to retain highlights by pulling the highlight slider down, and I'm stylistically kind of drawing focus to her. I've kind of inverted the values of focus in this image. So look, she is darker against a lighter backdrop, and now she is lighter against a darker backdrop. So that's the switcheroo I am doing when I edit my pictures. I want to draw focus to the person, not the surroundings. So here she's darker against a lighter backdrop. Here she is lighter against a darker backdrop. That's just how I do things. I want the emphasis to be on my subject, draw most attention to them. Lighter against lighter against darker, I think works better in a portrait like this versus how it started. So, all right, last photo. Make this quick here. I was trying to do a like 20-minute video, but here we are. It's 40 minutes, and I figure I got through a lot, like twice the amount of images that I did in the last video. So that's probably an improvement. So 12 images we got through relatively quickly here. So, all right, last photo. I'm going to warm this one up right off the bat. See if I can recover some highlight. And you can definitely see the clipped highlight, white and black points in this image really coming to effect, especially the white tone curve here and the white clipping points. So I'm going to go and do a linear tone curve so you can see what it used to look like. So we had more detail in. We had a white value, we had a little bit in the darker range, but when we do that tone curve, it muddles all of our white and brightest values. I think it's a cool look. I'm into it. You may not be. And this might be another photo that's a good candidate for dehaze. And I will push that dehaze slider a little bit to pull back some detail in the hair there, and that's what it's doing now. Let's see what it's doing to the whole image. Undo, redo. Now it's kind of making her too orange. I might pull back on that a little bit. And I might pull back on the vibrance a little bit to see if we can get not so orangey of a photo. I like that. I like that sunsetty, what do you call it, golden hour light, but not if it makes our skin tones orange. So I'm undoing the vibrance, redoing, and to counterbalance it, I can keep pulling that vibrance, and then it might be making her too cool. I can warm her up a little bit more. So somewhere in there is a happy medium. I don't like how the clouds look in the bright sky. I might not pull back on the highlights so much. Pull the exposure down a little bit. So it's just touch and go. I'm going to go before and after here. That's where we were at. That's where we ended up. This one's pretty subjective. I want to retain some of that haze from the feeling of the photo, but I also want to bring back some detail a little bit. I might pull back that dehaze adjustment a little bit. Fix the horizon a little bit with the crop. Bring it in just a hair. No. It's a tough one to look at. I bet if I came back to this photo more than once, I would edit it differently every time. I think I'm okay with that. Alright, so there you have it. Do a quick re-look at all these images. It's our first one, before, after. I might even warm that up a little more. It's funny, when I come back to an image after having done other edits, my perception of color and tone could be completely shifted, because now I'm looking at an indoor incandescent lit image versus a outdoor golden hour lit image, and now my perception of color and tone has changed, and now I see this photo and I want it to be warmer. Go figure. Like, that's why don't kill yourself too much. If you feel like you got a good edit going on, just move on to the next photo and don't kill yourself over it. You'll spend so much time, wasted time, trying to change every little nuance of the images if you start looking at them again. So your perception to color and light could be completely different the next time you see the image. So don't rack yourself over it. Don't frustrate yourself. So next photo, that's that black and white. I like it. Oh, sorry. Before, after, before, after. And maybe now I'm looking at that radial adjustment. Maybe it's too bright or too dark now. I might pull back the ambient a little bit, so now it's a more balanced image, but still drawing attention to the baby's face. Before, after.